The planet Vashtal 4 wasn't worth much: dense jungle, unpredictable weather, and unstable rebel pockets spread across the equator. But the Galactic Coalition had promised peace, and so the task force landed. 5 species, dozens of technologies, and one problem: humans had joined the coalition last cycle. Their contribution to the operation? A single support unit, clad in thick slabs of dull gray metal. Powered armor from Earth. The kind that creaked when it moved and left deep boot prints in the soil. To the coalition forces, it was a joke. While sleek exosuits shimmered under the sun, and translucent energy shields hummed with quiet sophistication, the human gear looked like a relic: brutish, heavy, obsolete. Some laughed. Others were more polite, but none took it seriously. One of the reptilian officers from the Cellari species pointed to the human squad leader's chest plate and scoffed. "Is that welded steel? You could deflect arrows, perhaps." The squad leader didn't answer. Sergeant Rowe was a broad-shouldered man in scarred armor, dented from old fights, sealed tight at the joints with reinforced flex plates. He adjusted the clips on his left gauntlet, checked the pressure seals, and moved on. No smug reply. No grin. Just another day. The Coalition Command Center briefed the unit that morning: low-risk patrol, minimal hostiles, routine scans. The local rebels were known for crude tactics and stolen plasma tech, nothing the Coalition couldn't handle. The confidence was palpable. "You don't even use shielding," a Zentari officer muttered to Rowe. "What happens when they open fire?" Rowe replied without looking up. "We dig in. We endure." The aliens didn't understand. They didn't need to. Humans had been enduring for a long time, on a planet that threw everything at them and then some. As the patrol descended into the canyon pass, the humidity climbed. Alien suits auto-adjusted cooling rates. Human armor hissed slightly as internal vents cycled pressure. The group spread out in formation, humans trailing in the rear as the coalition took point. Nobody expected resistance. Then the first plasma bolt hit. There was no warning. Just an ear-splitting screech as a beam of light lanced through the air and tore through a Zentari soldier's shield. It flared once, then failed completely. The second bolt tore into his suit. A third struck the canyon wall, spraying molten stone. Panic exploded through the comms. Coalition officers shouted orders, tried to regroup, but the ambush was already in motion. Rebel plasma turrets, half buried in the rock face, opened up in full. The shimmering energy barriers that had seemed so flawless collapsed one by one. Suits overloaded. Fire swept through the patrol like a scythe. One Cellari captain was sliced in half mid-sprint. His body dropped in 2 smoldering chunks. Others fell, screaming, their armor offering no more protection than a ceremonial robe. And through it all, Sergeant Rowe moved. He charged into the chaos, boots thudding against stone, as another bolt smashed into the ground beside him. He didn't dodge. He didn't slow down. He ran toward a fallen alien, the same one who mocked his suit hours ago. A plasma bolt slammed into Rowe's chest. Full impact. The shockwave hit like a thunderclap. The squad tracker blipped, then froze. Smoke billowed around him. Even the humans flinched. But he didn't fall. Out of the haze, a figure emerged, black in armor, cracked across the chest, edges glowing orange with residual heat. One arm hung limp. The other dragged the wounded Cellari behind cover. He dropped the alien, turned, and walked back into the fire. Another bolt hit his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He staggered but didn't go down. A third hit his backplate. A fourth grazed his helmet. He was a walking furnace of battered steel, still moving, still pulling bodies out of the kill zone. Alien soldiers watched, stunned, as their cutting-edge tech crumpled around them, and the thing they called scrap metal kept fighting. He reached a second soldier, down, bleeding, trying to crawl. Rowe knelt, lifted him over his shoulder, and turned again into the fire. His HUD flickered, systems dimming, alarms blaring. He kept going. By the time the humans reached the ridge and returned fire, half the patrol was gone. But the line held. Thanks to the one man who wouldn't stop. The coalition regrouped only after the turrets fell silent. The rebels fled, their weapons spent. Smoke hung heavy in the canyon. Bodies lay still. Sergeant Rose stood with his back against a rock face, breathing through a cracked rebreather. His armor hissed steam. The front plate was scorched black, bent at the center. Plasma scoring ran down both arms. His right boot had fused slightly to the rock. He was alive. And in the silence that followed, not one alien laughed. Not anymore. The medics arrived too late for most. Vaporized torsos. Melted helmets. Energy shields overloaded and fused to neural uplinks. The canyon was a graveyard of elite gear and alien pride. The survivors didn't speak. They stared. They stared at the human standing in the middle of it all, his armor still smoldering, chest plate cracked like broken stone, a fine layer of carbon scoring etched into every joint. He was burned, concussed, and half-deaf. But he was breathing. And he had walked through a plasma storm. Later, coalition analysts reviewed combat footage frame by frame. It wasn't just that Rose survived. It was how he moved, direct, methodical, like he'd trained for it. There was no panic in his posture. No hesitation. Plasma hit him center mass, and instead of collapsing, he pivoted and kept moving. They ran diagnostics on his suit. Power core drained to 30%. Vitals spiked, dropped, then stabilized. Internal foam patches auto-deployed across his ribs. The exoskeletal servos kept weight off his right leg, which had taken a near-direct blast. None of it should have worked. His armor didn't deflect plasma. It absorbed, dispersed, compartmentalized. Instead of preventing damage, it assumed it would happen. Multiple times. And it had backups for every failure. An alien technician remarked, "It's not armor. It's a moving bunker." Another added, "Who builds like this? This isn't efficiency. It's madness." They called it overkill. Earth engineers called it standard. The outer shell was 7 layers deep, ablative, kinetic, thermal diffusive. Beneath that, a microlattice designed to channel electromagnetic shock. Beneath that, an inertial dampening mesh to spread impact over time. Finally, a climate-sealed, pressure-stabilized survival capsule around the body. Everything was redundant. Everything was fail-safe. Weight wasn't a concern. Survivability was. Coalition doctrine favored elegance, sleek, fast suits with adaptive tech and reactive shields. Shields that, under perfect lab conditions, could block a direct energy strike for 3 seconds. Rose armor blocked it for 5. And then another. And another. The difference was intent. Alien suits were built assuming systems would work. Human suits were built assuming everything would go wrong. In the debrief, one of the surviving alien captains asked Rowe why the armor looked so primitive. He answered without ego. "It's not designed to look good. It's designed to bury us if we fail, and drag us out if we don't." A second question followed. "Why no shields?" Rowe shrugged. "You can't rely on a bubble when your enemy's shooting artillery. Plasma eats shields. Stone and steel take the hit." To most of the coalition, it sounded archaic. To those who had seen what happened, it sounded like doctrine forged in apocalypse. Word spread fast. The reports circulated to every major command fleet. Clips of Rose standing up through plasma fire were slowed, analyzed, enhanced. Rumors turned to briefings. The same officers who mocked the armor now requested blueprints. Earth denied the requests. Coalition tech standards couldn't replicate the materials, not without Deathworld tier production. The truth sank in slowly. Earth hadn't joined the coalition out of desperation. Earth had been surviving wars long before the coalition existed. Their weapons weren't crude. They were born of necessity. Every design came from generations of extinction-level threats, fought without orbital support, without backup, and often without air superiority. Earth learned to fight alone. Ro was pulled aside by a Centauri intelligence officer. She wanted to know why no one corrected the Coalition's assumptions. Why let the jokes go on? He looked her in the eye and said, "Because when it matters, we don't need your respect. Just your attention." She didn't reply. Later, as the engineers dismantled the charred armor piece by piece for analysis, they found something else. Etched on the inside of the backplate, behind the main spinal brace, was a small engraving. It read, "Built for the worst day of your life. Armstrong Foundry, Chicago." That day had come. And the armor had done exactly what it was built for. None of the Coalition suits had writing like that. None of them were expected to survive the worst day. They were built to delay it. Avoid it. Outsmart it. Humanity built for impact. By the end of the week, several alien officers requested joint training with the Earth unit. Some asked if humans could help retrofit their own armor. None made jokes. Ro, still recovering, said nothing. He spent his downtime reassembling the ruined armor, piece by piece, polishing the scorched edges with practiced care. It wasn't reverence. It was maintenance. This was what you did with armor that kept you alive. You didn't throw it out. You respected it. One of the junior human engineers explained it best to a stunned Coalition observer. You build like you'll never be hit. We build knowing we will. You optimize for speed. We optimize for surviving the unthinkable. You innovate. We endure. It wasn't a competition. It was a contrast. And now, everyone saw it. They had mocked the armor because it didn't look like theirs. Because it was big. Ugly. Loud. But now, when they thought of safety, they didn't think of shimmer or silence. They thought of steel grinding against stone, of smoke curling off cracked plating, of a man walking out of fire with someone else in his arms. They thought of human armor. And they would never look at it the same way again. The canyon was quiet now, but the consequences echoed far beyond its stone walls. Reports flooded into Central Command. Battle data showed a 78% casualty rate among Coalition forces during the ambush. Of the entire patrol, only the human squad maintained operational capacity throughout the engagement. Internal reviews launched immediately. Coalition scientists requested full access to Earth's powered armor specifications. They wanted to know how the suit survived hits that should have vaporized the wearer. Earth declined. Politely, but firmly. Coalition brass were confused. In their eyes, this should have been a breakthrough moment of shared advancement. Earth saw it differently. Survival wasn't a trade secret, it was a mindset. One that didn't translate well into labs or policy memos. A Centauri materials specialist led the post-combat forensic analysis. What they found redefined their understanding of military design. Each panel of the human suit showed stress distribution across dozens of microlayers. Heat dispersal wasn't just chemical, it was geometric. Damage didn't travel. It was redirected, slowed, and ultimately absorbed. The inside of the armor told the rest of the story. Cooling systems melted, backup regulators kicked in. The primary power cell overloaded. Auxiliary packs rerouted. Internal pressure dropped. Biofoam deployed. Dozens of automated systems failed, and dozens more took over. The suit was less a machine and more a chain of last chances, stitched together by brute logic and redundancy. Every alien engineer said the same thing: it shouldn't have worked. No other species would build like this. Too heavy. Too wasteful. Too paranoid. That last word stuck. Because it wasn't paranoia. Not to Earth. On Earth, wars weren't simulations. Recovery was never guaranteed. There were no orbiting failsafes or instant evac beacons. When Earth fought, it fought alone. So the armor was built with one purpose: give the soldier a second more. A second to breathe, a second to move, a second to return fire. And if not that, then a second to die with dignity. The analysts noted that alien armor failed gracefully. It folded in ways that preserved the wearer's body for recovery and medical treatment. Human armor didn't fold. It broke. It burned. It bled. And then it kept going. The Cellari survivor, one of the first Roe had carried to safety, requested a formal meeting. He didn't want to speak to Earth's ambassadors. He asked only for Sergeant Roe. They met in silence. The Cellari had one question. Why had Roe gone back into the fire for someone who laughed at him? Roe didn't offer a dramatic speech. He just said, because you are still breathing. To a species raised on hierarchy, protocol, and conditional mercy, it was a foreign concept. No rank. No reward. Just duty. It left an impression deeper than plasma ever could. The coalition's perspective began to shift. Slowly. Quietly. Alien officers began asking about Earth's military history. They learned about conflicts where entire divisions fought weeks without resupply. About battles where units were dropped with the understanding they might never return. About suits designed not just to protect, but to drag a wounded soldier 3 kilometers through fire, collapse into a shield wall, and then detonate if surrounded. What they once saw as crude and clunky now felt like the final evolution of survival. New training protocols were drafted. Mixed species units requested cross-training with human squads. Simulations were redesigned to include worst-case outcomes. One coalition general privately admitted, "We've planned for resistance. Earth plans for disaster." Earth never asked for credit. They didn't gloat. They didn't record the Canyon incident for propaganda. They simply documented the repair logs, updated the armor software, and prepped for the next mission. Roe's armor was not retired. It was patched, reinforced, and slotted for field use again. When asked why, the human tech team responded, "It's not broken. Just proven." A cultural shift began, first in whispers. Aliens no longer ridiculed human equipment in the field. They asked to touch the plating. To test the weight. Some even requested to train in it, despite the strain. Most couldn't handle it. Too heavy. Too hot. Too human. But the curiosity remained. One datapad left behind at a research post contained a note, "They build like pain is inevitable. And they build to crawl through it." The final review concluded that Earth's armor was not scalable for general coalition use. It was too specialized, too extreme. But it was respected now. Not for how it looked, but for what it survived. Roe was not given medals. Earth didn't hand out medals for doing the expected. His suit logged another mission complete. His body logged another trauma recovered. He went back to work, same as always. The aliens began to understand. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its firepower, or speed, or intellect. It was the refusal to go down. The refusal to die easy. To build, always, for the worst possible outcome, and to survive it anyway. They had seen shields fail. They had seen elegance incinerated. And they had seen a man walk out of that fire, dragging hope in one hand and a comrade in the other. From that moment on, they stopped calling it armor. They called it what it was. A warning. The commendation was quiet. No ceremony, no medals. Just a classified document, a few signatures, and a formal acknowledgement filed into Earth's coalition record. To Sergeant Roe, it meant little. He didn't fight for recognition. He fought because someone had to stand in the fire, and he knew he could. The armor that carried him through it all wasn't displayed in a museum. It was welded, reinforced, and returned to the field rotation. New paint over the burn marks. Internal systems flushed and recalibrated. But the scars remained. They always did. Among the alien survivors, something had shifted. The Cellari captain who once laughed now walked differently when near human units. The Centauri officers no longer mocked the suit's weight. Jokes died in the canyon. In their place came quiet, careful respect. Briefings changed. Where once humans were listed as auxiliary muscle, Now they were marked as primary breach teams. Requests for Earth-led patrols increased. Not because of politics. Because of reality. No one else had stood when the fire came. In a debrief room orbiting Vashtal 4, a senior analyst addressed command. He summarized the engagement in one line: "We prepare to avoid death. They prepare to live through it." The message spread through internal channels. Not doctrine. Not policy. Just understanding. Some officers resisted the shift. They called Earth's methods barbaric, outdated, excessive. But when asked if their own suits could have walked through plasma and carried 2 others out, none answered. New recruits arrived weekly. Some fresh from core worlds, wide-eyed and confident. When they first saw human armor, they flinched at the bulk, whispered to each other. But those whispers faded fast. One live-fire training drill silenced them. A simulation that pitted human units against high-intensity plasma drones. The others tapped out. The humans advanced. Not untouched, but unstoppable. The Cellari made the first formal request. A cooperative engineering program. They didn't want to copy human tech, they wanted to understand the mindset behind it. Earth agreed, but only conditionally. No shortcuts. No compromises. If they wanted to learn, they'd have to understand what it was built for. It wasn't just about armor. It was about preparing to bleed. Preparing to crawl. To lose every system and still have one left to keep moving. Not as a backup, but as an expectation. The aliens learned quickly that human tech didn't prevent damage. It accepted it. And outlasted it. Across the fleet, whispers turned into warnings. Rumors reached the frontier worlds. That the humans didn't fall when the shields failed. That one of them had walked through plasma fire to drag the others out. That their armor wasn't designed to protect. It was designed to endure. To bury itself in the dirt and rise again. Command tried to control the narrative, but the story had already taken root. It wasn't about who fired first, or who had better strategy. It was about who was still standing after everything else collapsed. Other species started adapting. Materials research began exploring heavier, layered protection. Old doctrines were reviewed. Field medics were retrained with Earth-taught triage. A dozen minor changes rippled outward, all stemming from one moment. One suit. One man who wouldn't go down. In an off-record interview, a coalition general was asked what he thought of human combat philosophy. He answered carefully. They don't fight like us. They don't plan for efficiency. They plan to walk out, even if it means leaving pieces of themselves behind. He was then asked if he feared them. He paused, then said, only if they ever decide we're the threat. Sergeant Rowe never knew about the interviews. He didn't read the reports. He didn't care about the political response. His concern was maintenance, checking welds, testing internal pressure valves, replacing degraded gel packs. The armor needed to be ready. The next call could come any time. A junior officer once approached him, trying to understand the logic. She asked why the armor didn't have better insulation from pain signals. Why it let him feel every impact, every burn. He answered, because sometimes, pain is the only thing that tells you you're still alive. That answer stuck with her long after. Earth never asked to lead. But after Vashtal 4, Command began assigning humans to critical zones. Not for their tactics. For their certainty. When everything else failed, the humans didn't break. They bent. They burned. But they stayed standing. And so, the legend began to grow. Not loud. Not official. Just a quiet understanding across species. That if the mission was doomed, and the odds were broken, and the fire was coming, you wanted a human at the front. Not because they were better. But because they didn't expect to survive. They just refused to die easy. What began as mockery became myth. And myth, in time, became warning. They had laughed at the armor once. Called it clunky. Outdated. Primitive. But when the fire came, it wasn't the sleek suits or elegant tech that saved lives. It was the walking bunker. It was the iron will sealed inside a coffin of steel and sweat. It was the human. And it was still standing. A new deployment order came through, different planet, different enemy, same fragility beneath the surface. Coalition leadership authorized Earth units for forward recon, a task traditionally reserved for elite Centauri infiltration squads. This time, no objections were raised. In the command chamber, during briefings, eyes didn't glance over human units anymore. They lingered. Commanders paid attention to human assessments. Their words carried new weight. No one openly admitted the shift. They didn't need to. The armor had done its job. But it wasn't just metal and systems. It was what it represented now. That resilience couldn't be measured in voltage or deflection. That willpower was a design spec Earth never removed. One captain, from a species that once dismissed humans as primitive survivalists, quietly requested to observe Earth unit training. He watched with quiet fascination as humans pushed gear past redline thresholds and trained under weights meant to simulate crushed terrain. There was no ceremony to it. No pageantry. Only sweat and repetition. Always planning for the worst. Always ready for it. The coalition tried to simulate the armor's performance in labs. They ran plasma tests. Recreated the impact zones from Vastal-4. The best results showed partial containment, followed by catastrophic failure. One engineer finally admitted, "You can't replicate mindset." Earth didn't waste time on testing what wouldn't happen. They prepared for the 1-in-a-million shot, the surprise strike, the worst-case breach. Not as a scenario. As standard procedure. A quiet phrase began circulating through the officer ranks. Human standard. It didn't mean optimal. It meant surviving without support. Holding the line when systems failed. It meant being the last one standing because everything else had already fallen. Manufacturing requests for Earth's armor surged. Requests denied. Earth wasn't being selfish. The suit wasn't a product, it was a commitment. It only worked because of the person inside. It wasn't armor that saved Roe. It was how it was worn. How it was trusted. The joke about clunky metal died completely when a second ambush occurred on a desert moon in the Dragon sector. Coalition teams fell back under heavy fire. One human moved forward, his suit cracking, systems failing. But he reached the comms beacon, planted it under fire, and brought the orbital barrage down before extraction. He lost an arm. The suit stayed online. Same design. Same materials. Same philosophy. The aliens started calling them coffin suits. A grim nickname. Not because they trapped their wearers, but because they were built to be buried and still bring someone back. There was no ego in the human units. No need for status. They didn't care how advanced someone else's armor looked. They only cared if it would hold under pressure. And most of it wouldn't. A veteran commander described it best. Human armor looks like it expects to lose everything. And still has one more layer after that. The culture around Earth units changed without official orders. Human recommendations became doctrine in fringe systems. When new bases were built on hostile ground, Earth engineering templates were copied. Crude. Heavy. Reinforced. Command finally approved the optional inclusion of redundant systems in future coalition suits. Not elegant. Not efficient. But now, no longer laughed at. The original suit worn by Roe remained active for 3 more deployments. After that, it was decommissioned, not because it failed, but because the structure had absorbed too much to guarantee stability. They retired it not with display glass, but with respect. Welded shut. Stored in a sealed armory deep beneath an Earth garrison. No plaque. Just a serial number. And a file labeled Combat Verified. Roe never gave speeches. Never told his story. But others did. Survivors spoke of the sound his boots made walking through fire. Of how the armor didn't shine, it steamed. Of the moment they realized who would carry them out if everything else went wrong. A generation of alien recruits grew up hearing about that day on Vashtal 4. They didn't grow up laughing at human armor. They grew up hoping someone like Ro would be beside them when the line broke. Humanity never claimed superiority. They didn't need to. They just showed up, got hit, got up, and kept going. Not for glory. Not for pride. But because it was built into them. Other species feared loss. Humans planned for it. Others avoided danger. Humans met it head-on. Others survived when lucky. Humans survived on purpose. By the time the Coalition formally changed battlefield doctrine to incorporate Earth survival principles, no one called them overbuilt anymore. Now, they called them essential. And in every high-risk mission brief, one line became standard protocol. If a human's wearing it and still moving, follow them. No one questioned it. Because they all remembered the armor that took a direct plasma hit. And didn't stop.